Okay, so I have this image here of a French bulldog, and then this image here of a fish. The good thing about these two images is that they will match up, as this is a side profile and this too is a side profile. Obviously we're going to have some issues with texture and color between the two images, but what we're going to do is we're going to cut the fish out from this environment, cut the dog out from here, and place it into a new artboard, make the image black and white, and then build it up from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new document. And you can find under print, view all presets, you'll see that there is an A5 template here. We want to make sure that the color is RGB and 300 resolution, and then the orientation we want to switch it to landscape, and then create. So this is the artboard in which we'll create the work from. So the first thing we have to do is cut out the dog image. To do that, we're going to use the pen tool. So just clicking on the pen tool here, making sure it's the first option, Command plus to zoom in, and I am just going to start at the top of the head here and work my way around. Now here I don't need to be too mindful of the details so much, but what I want to make sure that I do is I cut in just inside the edge of the dog. I don't want to have any of the background coming through in what I cut out here. So again, in using the pen tool, what we're doing is we're creating nodes, N-O-D-E-S. And nodes are these little dots. And then when we create curves between these dots, we call them Bezier curves. So the combination of the dots and the space in between and the curves that are used helps to create almost like a line here that's going to be our outline for the animal. So you can see here I'm being a little bit loose with it. I don't want to be too literal, but at the same time I want to try and get it as accurately as I can. But again, I want to make sure that I just have the image of the dog and not so much anything else from the background. I'm going to cut this back actually. You can see that there's some area in here, so I'm going to just use that. It's a little bit vague, hard to see, but this will work fine. So again, we don't need to be too precise about all the hair here. We can just create the shape, because we have to remember that we are merging this with a fish, which is quite a sharp-edged object, and whereas the dog is a bit fluffy and hairy, we want to try to get something that can merge somewhat realistically. Again, just making sure that I don't take any of that background into my cutout. Okay, so I pretty much have my path made here around the dog. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my foreground is black and my background is white. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the dog again with the pen tool selected, go down to make selection, press OK, and you can see then that we've got these marching ants, which is just highlighting our selection. Click down here in the layers panel on layer mask, and that's going to remove the background. If at any point we want the background to come back in, we can just right click and disable the layer mask, and right click again to enable the layer mask once more. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to Command A to select everything, then Command Shift C, which is going to select the layer and the layer mask together, and Command V to paste it in. And when I paste it in, it's going to drop the layer mask from the side of it, but the effect of the layer mask is still there. Command T to transform the image, and you'll see up here that I have the width and the height locked in, which means that if I grab from the top or the side in, it's going to lock that in perfectly here too. So I'm going to bring this down quite a bit in anticipation for the fish body taking up this part here. I'm going to leave it about this size just to be on the safe side. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to start cutting out the fish. Okay, so follow the same basic principle, just right click, make selection, OK, and then layer mask. our fish. Again, Command A to select all, Command Shift C to copy everything with the layer mask effect. Come back into our A5 document, Command V to paste, Command T to transform and bring the scale of the fish down. And this is going to be a good barometer and what we need to do, just scaling the fish to the artboard. Press click. I'm going to name the layers. Bring the fish below the dog layer. The dog layer selected, I'm going to bring the opacity down a little bit so I can see a little bit what's happening underneath. Might be good to match up the dog eyes with the fish eyes as a way of merging them together successfully. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just adjust the dog there a little bit, make him a little bit bigger. I'm going to maybe adjust the angle a little bit too. This will help for the ears to come out a little bit more. And also for the neck to cut in here and try to maybe merge into this area a bit better. But I don't want to overdo it either. I think something like this could work, so I'm going to give it a go. Okay, so what I'm going to do here to help me with all of this is to create a layer mask. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mask the fish there. So create a layer mask down here. You'll see it creates this white artboard. What I've got to do here now is to flip over, make sure I've got black as my foreground, choose the paintbrush, and then when I start applying, again making sure that I'm selecting the layer mask and not the layer itself, because if I start applying over here I'm painting black on the layer, which I don't want to do. Instead I want to make sure that I'm painting on the layer mask. When I do that, you start to see that I erase the fish in that area. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing for the dog, but before I do that I'm going to cut some of the dog away a little bit. What I'm looking at here is this turn and this, and they can replicate the gills, so I'm going to try that. I'm going to bring the opacity down a little bit so I can see what I'm doing, again making sure it's on the dog layer so I can see the difference that's here. So I'm getting an idea of the image a bit better. So I can see here the fish. So I'm going to just take this in a little bit. Then coming up here, follow the shadow a little bit down here, bring it up to this area here. And cutting down on the fish in the same kind of way that we see here. I'm going to take that area, make selection, and I'm just going to delete this away. Command D. Okay, I'm going to bring the dog opacity back up. Now I'm going to bring in my layer mask. And now I'm going to bring the brush in and start applying some of that here. Okay, now this is going to be tricky, the fin here. I'm going to bring down the size of the brush because it is quite high, because it is quite big. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to this image of the fin. I'm going to try and incorporate this because I think it would work well. This I'm going to leave a little bit. I think it's, we're not going to worry too much about the detail because it's already visible. But in here, I'm just going to start bringing this in a bit more. It's going to create a curve here. Grabs that. Now I'm going to right click, make a selection, press OK. Come back into the dog layer mask. Come back here to the dog layer mask. Bring in my brush, and again just gently start bringing that back up. Okay, Command D. Just clean up the outside of it a little bit more. Okay, I'm starting to get there. Now I like this crease here, and I like this crease here too. Again, it replicates just the gills a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the sharpness of this to match the sharpness of the fish. So I'm selecting on the layer here, I'm going to go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to desaturate the image, which means to remove all the color. I'm going to bump up the clarity here quite a bit, bring up the exposure. Play around with these effects a little bit until I'm happy enough with the lighting. Okay. I'm going to go back to the fish layer. I'm going to image adjustments, desaturate, so it's going to look at what it looks like when it's completely black and white. So this is a little bit darker. I'm going to bring up maybe the brightness on the fish a bit more. So go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, bring up the exposure, bump the clarity up a little bit. That's okay. Okay, so we start to see things becoming a bit clearer. I'm just going to come back to this one and bump the clarity up a little bit more. Filter, Camera Raw Filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a copy of the dog. I'm going to turn this one off. I'm going to come back to this one. I'll go down to Overlay. Then bring this one back up. Here I'm just going to bring back some of this a little bit. So a bit down here now I'm after losing, so what I'm going to do is just bring back the white and make sure I'm on my layer mask. White, bring that back in. Back to the black. Take some of that texture, get it blending in a bit better so you can see some of the fish texture coming in with the dog a bit better. A little bit of fish texture coming in here too. Still keeping some of those creases. Okay, I think we're starting to get somewhere. So I'm going to select the top layer, hold down Shift, select the bottom layer, and I'm going to put this into a folder and just call it layers. And then I'm going to Command J duplicate that, take all of the layers here again and merge them, Command E, bring that out of the layers, delete that. So now I have my merge layer here, but also I have my layers inside here if I want them. For now, I'm just going to work with this so I can move this around easily. And I'm going to just bring it into Camera Raw Filter one more time just to make sure that we've got a uniform approach to it. See, when I bump up the texture, the scales pop out a little bit more. Okay. So that helps to blend that image a bit more. Look at what it was to what it is now. It's a bit more detailed. Next, I'm going to grid this. And again, this is going to depend on what you've got available to you there. So what you need to do is measure up an A4 sheet of paper. And imagine this is the top of the A4 paper. This is the halfway point of the A4 paper. So rule out your top from left to right using your ruler, lining it up, and making your grid, your vertical lines. Then line the ruler up to the edge of the top and create your horizontal lines across here. Once you do that on the paper, then you can come in here and make sure that you can create the same guidelines on your Photoshop document. And how you do that is by coming into View and going down to New Guide Layout. So you can see for me, when I use an A4 document, you can imagine this space here being the A4, I've got 7 columns across and I've got about 10 rows with a little bit left over. So I'm going to try and recreate this by just bumping this up a bit more. So this is something similar. So I'm going to bring this down to the same 328. I need to remove the number of columns, and that gives me 7 by 5. That looks about right. Press OK. And I'm just going to make sure that everything is okay, that I don't have anything being lost coming over a square. I think this should work out okay. So this gives me my grid. I can open up this image in Photoshop and then I can work from this image. And this grid only works digitally. You can print this off and then create a grid using your ruler and pencil if you want to do it that way, or you can just open up Photoshop and work from this. The good thing then as well is you can just zoom in. Other things you can do to help you with the drawing is create a viewfinder. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Here we're going to come back to the colors. I'm going to reverse again to make black my foreground color. I'm going to come over here to the rectangle tool, and I'm going to select the corner here of one of the squares, click, hold down, hold shift, which is going to lock it in as a square shape, and I'm going to go over 3 columns and 3 rows right to the very edge, and that's going to give me this black shape here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to right click on the layer, and I'm going to go down to rasterize layer. That's going to allow me to cut it. I'm going to change the name of this to viewfinder. I'm going to come up here to the rectangle marquee tool, which is this one, and then in the center I'm going to make sure that I just got that just right, and click, hold down, hold shift just like last time, and expand it to the length of that square, and then release it and then delete. Command D to deselect. And now when I'm working on detail, if I want to, I can just focus on one square at a time, move the viewfinder, and focus again on one square at a time without the distraction of everything else. Okay, so I hope you find that useful, and I hope you enjoy working on the image.